Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter at RealBirdLawyer. Here with me, as always, after a 1-week hiatus for both of us, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt. What's going on, buddy?
Oh, well, some podcast news. We have podcast news every now and then, and that's this week.
Yeah, okay, so this would be the part where I would say we're brought to you, as always, by the Pigskin Podcast Network, but we're no longer brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network because, ta-da!
No one is brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network.
It no longer exists. This is sort of like an FTX-style Ponzi scheme level collapse. Yeah. I don't know about that, but what happened is
they were not a scam. But
the other podcasts in the network were not pulling their weight, and we were lifting those podcasts up, and they were dragging us and the rest of TPPN down. And
they were, and it's funny to joke about that, but I actually did have a talk with the guy that runs TPPN, very nice Canadian fellow, and he said, or I checked in with him, and I'm just like, hey, we've had the pod for a couple years. I know you run this whole network. You've got pods all over the place. Here's our numbers. Are they good, bad, indifferent? Are they fine? And he was like, yeah, you guys actually are, are heavy hitters. Like you're doing a lot of good work. And I felt great about that. But then when the network collapsed, then I was like, well, I wish there were some more heavy hitters like us that could have kept everything going. But they were
the lights on.
They were a great get for us. It was about a year and a half ago. They paid a bunch of stuff for us for like hosting. Like, I don't know if anybody out here listening to podcasts knows, but they're not free. They're $20 to $25 a month usually to host them. And they got our DK ad negotiated and paid for and all that stuff, which paid us pretty well. So certainly
we were heavily in the red in this podcast
before we got
TPPN turned us around financially, and we make a profit on this podcast now. It's not a living wage, but we get paid for our efforts now, or we were getting paid for our efforts, and now we're free agents again. So
yeah, look for, potentially us to glom on with another organization or something like that here in a couple of weeks as we talk to more people and kind of rub some elbows and stuff like that. But just know that even though we are no longer brought to you by the Pigskin Podcast Network, we will always be brought to you by someone, even if that someone is our own blood, sweat, and tears.
Which it was for, however long we did the podcast. Right, exactly. Before we actually started making money off of this podcast. Since we are temporarily between networks, I will make an extra special plug for our personal sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is not going away, and promo code SUNNY, SUNNY, will get you a match on your first deposit up to $100. So do the math. You put $100 in, you get $100 for free. That's $200. You invest that in Underdog, you double your money. That's $400. You double it again. It's $800, etc. I'm not going to continue to do math live on the podcast, but this is a great time to do Underdog. If you are not familiar with the concept of Underdog Fantasy, it is primarily there are, overs and unders and prop bets and things that you can do on Underdog, but the main appeal of Underdog is doing drafts. It is draft season. The actual NFL draft is coming up in like 3 weeks. And until that time, you can go on Underdog Fantasy. You can draft a fantasy team. It's best ball, which means that you never set your lineup. You just do the draft. You get the players that you think are going to be good. And at the end of the season, each week, your lineup is set automatically based on your highest scoring players. So if you have a guy, on your bench, like some rando, like, I don't know, McCole Hardman has an amazing game. Demarcus Robinson is playing the Raiders, right? Like, he goes off for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sammy Watkins, gets the Jaguars. That guy's in your starting lineup for that week. But you're trying to put together the best team. And what's so fun and cool about doing Underdog this time of year is you have the ability to draft rookies before they actually get drafted at NFL teams. So if you think that, a guy is going to get drafted by the Chiefs, for example, like you think maybe they're going to go up and they're going to get a Jackson Smith and Jigba, they're going to go up and they're going to get a Quentin Johnston, you're going to get a discount on that guy, because I guarantee you as soon as that guy gets drafted in the first round of the Kansas City Chiefs, he is not going to be going in the 9th round on Underdog Fantasy. He's going to be going in like the 4th round on Underdog Fantasy. So if you think you know more about what's going to happen in the draft than the other people who are drafting on Underdog Fantasy, you have a real chance to make some money. And if you use our promo code, we also make some money.
Sure. And that's going to be the only ad of the show. No pre-roll before the show, no mid-week or no mid-show DK read. So that's it. That's how we're plugging. And without further ado, we have a great guest right now. Joining us now on the show, friend of the show, managing editor for ChiefsWire, editorial director at KC Sports Network, and member of the Pro Football Writers Association, Charles Goldman, on Twitter at GOLDMCTNFL. Charles, how you doing tonight, buddy? Good to talk to you.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on, guys. It's been a minute.
You get into the season, Charles, and it's a Super Bowl season, and it's just like, and you know this better than we do. We took our first week off last week in several months. I mean, since after the AFC Championship game loss, I think, or the offseason. Mm-hmm. So, you get into the swing of things, and then it's boom, 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 boom. And, we're right back into the thick of it. So we're happy to have you back on.
And I'm happy to be here, man. I know it. I still haven't taken a week off.
I bet.
You are never going to take a week off. Anything you're working on currently that you want to highlight for our listeners before we get into the show?
Oh, man. Just a ton of different stuff coming to ChiefsWire. I'm right now working on some pro day stuff. We had the local prospect day. That was today, I think. The Chiefs nowadays, they used to be really like forthcoming about their local prospect day, and now they're very secretive about it. They're just they don't release the like full list of prospects, so you got to track these guys down. But I mean, it was really cool. I had a story about former Chiefs fullback Kimball Anders, our new Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
His son was at the team's local pro day, and I feel like those are stories that like fans they should want to like know about, want to hear about. So it always that kind of, I was like, well, man, I wish like the Chiefs had been a little bit more like forthcoming with that stuff, because I'm sure that as much as I covered of it, there's more details there that they probably could have unearthed and shared with the fans out there.
Well, everybody make sure to check out the ChiefsWire on Twitter at the ChiefsWire or, USA Today. I'm sure you've all read it constantly like we have, but just in case you were curious where that content's going to be, Charles will be tweeting it and it'll be there.
And we've got Charles for the whole show. So without further ado, let's get into the news. So we got a little bit of news this afternoon. It feels like, I don't know, Charles, I know you're constantly hitting the wire for every little bit of news, and that's what I love about you. But we literally last week, we had a conversation about the show and whether or not we were going to do it. And we're like, there's not really anything happening. But today we got the news that Patrick Mahomes is doing another little throw around down in Texas. He was joined by Shane Bussell, Chris Oladokun, and 49ers quarterback Trey Lance, which is a little bit interesting. Chiefs wide receivers that were there, MVS, Sky Moore, Justin Ross, Amir Smith-Marset, and Jerian Ely. They were working out at the TCU indoor facility today. What were your impressions about this? Not necessarily surprising to see him getting some work in the offseason, but any names or any news that jumped out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it worked last year, right? Like they brought all the new receivers in and had them, meet with Mahomes down in Texas, did some throwing.
Won the Super Bowl.
Right. But, they did like phase one of the offseason program there, which it's not quite there yet, but they kind of had that all virtually. They did like the team meetings and stuff virtually so that guys could be down in Texas with Pat. And yeah, I mean, you saw kind of the dividends were paid throughout the season. We saw some big games from guys like MVS, who stepped up in a big way. We saw Justin Watson, and they credited, those throwing sessions down in Texas for those big performances and for getting that chemistry kind of going early on. So we're going to see more people down there. I know this was kind of just like the start, the onset. People were like, why wasn't Kadarius Toney there? Why weren't some of the tight ends there? Why weren't the running backs there? They're going to cycle guys through, and guys got their own schedules and things going on. And, Tony, obviously he's got his hip hop career as well. So I'm sure that he had that going on. I was excited to hear that Justin Ross was down there. Amir Smith-Marset as well. Like some of these guys who, they're going to have a chance to go in and compete. Like they're maybe they're not going to make the team, but they're sure going to be like in the thick of it and trying to. And the way to make headway is to be down here throwing with Mahomes.
When you figure getting on 15's good side, that doesn't hurt for having a voice in the room that's vouching for you and all that stuff. What'd you think about the addition of Trey Lance there? I mean, obviously they're in Texas and all that stuff. I thought it was interesting that another NFL quarterback would be involved there. What were your thoughts?
Before the season last year, there was a lot of like practice tape and like stuff from the offseason that was coming out about Trey Lance where, he was kind of getting comped to Mahomes, where he was like doing things in practice where guys were like, whoa, like, like what?
I remember.
Right. And, then he had the injury in like week 2, ankle, just shredded, whatever. Just it sucked. It was not good for him. Big setback for his career. But like when you're comped to Mahomes and like you're talented and he's talented, I feel like, why not go seek out Bobby? Why not go seek out APEC where, they've shaped this guy's career? I mean, they're literally, in part responsible for, preparing him, to be Patrick Mahomes. So, if Trey Lance can get that same type of, work in out there in Texas, I say all the power to him. I mean, I think it's smart. I think it's very smart of him to link up with all those guys.
Austin might have gotten rid of his Trey Lance dynasty stock a season too early, but we will.
I don't know about that. He was traded as part of a package for Josh Allen. It's a one quarterback league. It's all fine. Yeah, but I do remember the hype because he was a member of my dynasty team when all that hype was coming out, and it was great. And he lasted 2 weeks, and then I had to jettison him for another option because longtime listeners of the show will remember that my dynasty team was cursed.
They were. Speaking of your dynasty team, another star of that dynasty team, Tyreek Hill was in the news this week. A little quote from him when he was on 810 with the Sheepdog and the Shermanator. He said, "Chiefs Kingdom, when the Miami Dolphins come to Arrowhead Stadium this year, guess what we're going to do? Guess what we're going to do? I hate to throw up the peace sign against y'all. I hate to do it. Guess what? I'm going to be y'all worst enemy that day. I'm going to be y'all worst enemy. You better change the signals. I know every signal that y'all got." So, first of all, I think people have reacted to this, I would say maybe predictably, but I have no problem with it. I think this is exactly the type of guy he was while he was here, and we all loved him for it. I think it's very hypocritical to now not love him for it because he happens to be talking about. I mean, we all know it's a big deal to him to come back here. What were your thoughts when you heard the soundbite or saw that he was talking about the matchup in Arrowhead?
I love him for it. It's such a boring part of the offseason. It's a nice thing to have. Yeah. It certainly was driving some page views to our website. But it's he's a competitor and he was having some fun with his guys, with Sherman and Garrett Dieter. It doesn't really bother me at all. And then, now he's got this playful back and forth going with Chris Jones on Twitter. It's just, it's fun. Like these guys were teammates. They were in the trenches together. They, went through mostly good times, but probably some bad times too. And, it's fun to see them kind of trade barbs a little bit and have a good time with something that's, well far off. I mean, obviously, Hill saying, "Oh, I know all of your all your calls, all your signs, whatever, all your, all that stuff." I mean, Andy knows that. Like,
like Andy's never played against a former player before.
Right.
But it's fun. It's kind of like pro wrestling, right? Like that's Tyreek's whole mentality. He's got the, big shades and talks trash in the locker room and just does stuff because he knows that people get a kick out of it. And I also think from just a purely like comic relief perspective, like he's not talking shit to the Patriots or I know he is, but like this is like he knows that the Chiefs love him and he knows that the guys he's talking about and talking to, like they're not going to sit there and be like, "Goddamn Tyreek Hill," like they're brothers. So I don't mind it. I hope that anyone that's listening that got all bothered by the comments and maybe soured on Tyreek from it, I hope you take a step back. He's not hurting anything by talking trash, but maybe the most interesting part about this little interview to me was the second bit of news from him, which was that he said he plans on walking away from the game after the 2025 season when his contract is up with the Dolphins. He'll be 31. speed guy that, might be on the wrong end of that equation. Were you surprised by that? And then second, do you think there's any chance that he actually walks away at that time?
I think it just depends. I think that the Chiefs will be feeling really good if
yes,
they got that trade package for a guy who only lasts one contract. But I'll believe it when I see it. Like
you'll see it when you believe it. Yeah,
right. It's just right now it's just talk. Yeah, and I don't doubt that. I think what he said, he wants to get into like the business side of things and whatnot, whether that's in the NFL or with his brand. Which, speaking of which, I thought it was such a clever marketing ploy to put that video on his brand's page instead of like his personal Twitter account or something like that. Driving people to his brand to make purchases. He's got a new line. He's got a new line. He's great at using Chiefs Kingdom for like interaction engagement and stuff like that. So he knows. He's gaming the system. So he's already a master at this marketing and business right here. So I don't blame him for maybe having that thought, but I have a hard time seeing him just like putting a hard deadline on it and saying, hey, I'm going to walk away from the game as soon as my contract's up. I feel like he's probably going to have to like rethink that. It's tough. Like guys, it is tough for NFL players to walk away from the game. Some people know when it's their time, but we've seen it with some of the all-time greats. Brady probably waited around a few seasons too long, right?
yeah.
But I'd be a little bit surprised if he stuck to that, and was like for sure 100% certain retiring after that contract.
Well, plus he'd be saying no to umpteen millions of dollars. Somebody would want to pay him 20, 30, 40 million dollars to come after that year. So I would think.
I want to talk about, for our final item of news, someone who's been involuntarily retired from the game of football, and that is John Elway. John Elway was not let go because his contract was up, but his contract was not renewed, and he's no longer a member of the Denver Broncos organization. This is just going to be however long we want to go around the little round table here and sort of rub this in, get our digs in. I do want to pay special attention to team spokesperson / 9 News reporter Mike Kliss, who wrote this in the Elway obituary that came out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that came out 2 days ago on Tuesday, which by the way was my birthday. This was an incredible birthday present for me. Although Elway's decade-long stint as the team's general manager didn't end as he or anyone else in Broncos country had hoped, the first half of his term was arguably the most successful in league history.
What?
In his first 5 seasons as GM, Elway was the architect of 5 consecutive AFC West division titles, 2 Super Bowl appearances, and a world championship in 2015. I guess we could start there. This obviously is absurd. And I, in fact, had Broncos fans reply to me to tell me that this was not absurd. But this is laughably absurd. This is like, and I expect it coming from Mike Kliss. For those of you who are not familiar with this work, he is literally like being paid also by the Broncos organization. He's not a real reporter. He's basically like an undercover team spokesperson to write puff pieces about the Broncos and John Elway.
Yes.
But this was absurd, even by Mike Kliss's standards.
I completely agree. It was such a, it's not arguable. He said arguably, and it's literally not arguable. The Patriots probably had 6 5-year stretches that are more accomplished than the best that Elway ever got to.
It's not even the best stretch in AFC West history in the last 15 years.
No.
Because the last
Chiefs
5 years, the Chiefs have inarguably had a better past 5 years than the Broncos did.
Won the division every year, won 2 Super Bowls, got to a third, went to the AFC Championship, the other 2
games.
All 5.
Yeah, right.
There's also something to be said about like what came after that success.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Because it's not like the it's not like the Broncos had these like atrociously bad teams. It was just the fact that Elway couldn't find a competent quarterback to like keep the thing going after Peyton Manning. Like
not even competent.
And that was his biggest failure. And honestly, I think it completely devalues any of the good stuff because the fact that it could have been so much better.
Well, I think we all will agree that the best thing Elway did in management for the Broncos was convince Peyton Manning to come to the team. Like there was no other, the roster building, the mega defense in 15 and all that stuff aside. Like the reason that he was a quote successful GM while he was there was just because he convinced a quarterback on his,
he got to draft Von Miller and then he convinced, and to be clear, I mean, he just lucked into that, right? It's not like it took a special kind of scouting eye to draft Von Miller or to convince Peyton Manning to come and play for the Broncos. I mean, come on.
The other thing about Elway's time with the Broncos, that just as it's coming to a conclusion, it soured so hard, and then they all wanted him out, and then he only was the special assistant or whatever, when
he got promoted, when he got
the ghost in the team, that whatever. Yeah, right. He only did that for 1 year, and then they were like, we don't even want you to do that anymore. Like they clearly were done with whatever ideas he was bringing to the table. They didn't feel that he brought any value. Like you just don't build a legacy and then crumble it that quickly unless you weren't very good at it in the first place.
Not only that, Taylor, but they are now owned by the richest owner by far in the National Football League.
Patrick Mahomes.
And he's like, I don't even want you. Well, that's good. I meant the Walton Penner Group, but
we all know who owns the Broncos.
Yes, we do. And he doesn't quite have Walmart money yet, but I tell you what, he'll probably get there. But you literally have the richest owner in the NFL, and he's like, I don't even want to give this guy a ceremonial position.
No
paycheck.
Yeah,
get him out of the building.
You can't even collect a token, $100,000 a year.
You can't even give him some cushy consulting gig because you're afraid of the damage that he'll cause if he's in the building.
It's not a good situation, and it hasn't been a good situation there for a long time, and I'm pretty sure it's going to continue to not be a good situation.
Yeah, it's quite the fall from grace. It's just it's wild to me that I mean he's like he was synonymous with the Broncos for so long, and now just tossed to the side.
Tossed to the side like a used rag. It's a bummer. You hate to see it. Things that you don't hate to see, Charles. We're going to transition into the second part of our program here. We've talked about the news. We've not had you on in quite some time. I think you came on, was it before the draft or around the draft this time last year? Is that the last time you were with us?
That sounds correct.
I think it was before the season began, I want to say.
Oh, that could be. Yeah. That's right. So we haven't talked to you since something happened. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl again. Woo! For the second time in 4 years. So we have to start there. We have to start there.
Other side here. Here we go. Hold on. There it is.
Oh, yeah.
Right there. Super Bowl patch.
He's got his Travis Kelce hat with the jersey with the patch on it. So, Charles, before we get into, the offseason, the draft, we want to talk to you about those things. But, just gush about the Super Bowl with us for 3 or 4 minutes. What was it like to watch the Chiefs win the Super Bowl again for the second time in 4 years?
Yeah, it felt good. It certainly felt good.
Okay, moving on.
No, I just look. It felt good because and people are they gaslighted Chiefs fans so badly because they were like everyone came out and we were like, people didn't believe in us. People doubted us. They're like, oh, well, Vegas odds, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, no one cares about the Vegas odds. You don't read Vegas odds. You read freaking Adam Rank's stinky opinion online, or, you hear like some boob on NFL Network or ESPN, saying that like the Chargers have a better chance to win the Super Bowl than the Chiefs. And this stuff happened.
Bart Scott saying they wouldn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Not even the playoffs.
It's absurd. It's absurd how they were doubted. you understand what people were saying when Tyreek Hill was traded and the concerns, like you get that. Mm-hmm. But the fact that every other aspect of this team was doubted, that Patrick Mahomes, that Andy Reid, that the defense, Steve Spagnuolo, all these guys, the entire coaching staff, Brett Veach even, was doubted. I mean, shit, I was arguing with people online that he should have been the executive of the year. And now everyone's like, wow, look at this draft that Kansas City had. And, you know, it's just, it feels good to see them, you know, kind of overcome all that nonsense, to have blocked out all that noise and to succeed, because, you know, there are a lot of these guys that were on this team that were part of that Super Bowl LV team that, like, they didn't get it done, and that, like, stuck with them. Yep. You know, some of the guys who aren't here now, I mean, Juan Thornhill, Colin Saunders, guys who moved on in free agency, like, that loss stuck with them, and they helped the Chiefs get back and win another one. And I you know, Andrew Wiley, like, that was a guy who was on that offensive line in that Super Bowl.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. And he had to listen to all the bullshit the week leading up to the Super Bowl. Yep. Right. The all the stuff about the Eagles having, you know, the most sacks in the league and this dominant pass rush. 0 sacks, put it on a damn t-shirt. I mean, just like it was just it was really glorious and, like, gratifying to see that, and to see you know, the Chiefs be back on top. You know, I loved it. I can't say enough how blessed I feel to be able to cover this team now the third time in a Super Bowl. I have to say that winning one is immensely better than losing one, and having to cover it. But man, just incredible. Such an incredible experience. I'm so happy for the entirety of Chiefs Kingdom, for just the most deserving fans. I mean, you know, you guys know how much everybody loves the Chiefs in Kansas City. So, and in Chiefs Kingdom's global form now. But right. It's so cool. I can't say enough about it.
What you think about what it said about Mahomes and his career trajectory, his current placement in the NFL? Like, I know that there are opinions about Patrick that Chiefs Kingdom has known and shared since the day he walked in the building, right? Like, everyone knew he was special. They knew that if you asked every GM in football who they would want under center, they would all 32 of them would say Mahomes. But when he gets the second ring, when he's now, with Brady's retirement, the only active player, well, really only one of 4 active quarterbacks with a ring, but the only one with 2. The talk about Burrow and, I mean, Herbert and Hurts and all the young good guys, that was grinding my gears personally, because I know they're good, but they ain't 15. Like, that, there's a big gap there. What did you think about kind of what that said for his placement in the league?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an immense gap, because I don't know that, you know, that Burrow or Herbert or, you know, any of these other young guys could endure the way that he did. I mean, you look at, you know, what happened with his ankle. I mean, we've seen him play through some stuff before, right? But, like, that stuff is stuff of legend, right? Like, you just don't see that. Like, it's not normal for a guy to get a high ankle sprain and then, like, you know, go out there
miss one drive in the whole playoffs,
right? Like, it is not normal. It's special in a way that we, you know, haven't seen before. And, you know, I think that as much credit as we have, you know, the training staff, and I know, you know, if you try to give him praise, he'll credit the Chiefs training staff, and he'll credit, you know, Patrick Mahomes. But Bobby Stroup, he deserves so much credit, because the training that Mahomes undergoes and goes through. I mean, we see these little glimpses,
different
videos and whatnot. It is different. You don't see this other stuff with all these other quarterbacks in the league. You don't see it. And it's very specialized, and all the different things he's doing, it's so intentional. For the different types of things that he's going to encounter, the different types of stresses that his body is going to encounter on any given play. And it prepares him to be the type of player that he needs to be to go out there and be Patrick Mahomes and to win these games. And it's so special to see. And man, I have so much fun watching this guy play. I'm sure that everyone else out there has the same amount of joy that I have watching this guy play. But it's crazy how I feel like some NFL fan bases and fans have become a little desensitized to it because he's not their quarterback, right? Yeah. He's not, and they're like, oh, it's not that special. He's just, this regular guy. But man, some of the things he does on a weekly basis, it just it still blows me away. I'm still takes my breath away. It makes me think about, all these horrible quarterbacks that we've had to live through.
Well, every single one lifetime. Of them.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just it's such a blessing. It's such a blessing. And as far as his legacy is concerned, in the league history books and whatnot, there's always going to be detractors and people trying to take away from what he's accomplished. But in my eyes, he's already the greatest quarterback in Chiefs franchise history. Obviously,
why'd you stop at Chiefs franchise history?
Yeah.
Does he have a chance to be the greatest in NFL history? The story's still being written, but I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of his career that's what we're talking about.
I love it. So you mentioned, Charles, the satisfaction that we got out of this season by being doubted. And I think that's a good transition into kind of the offseason talk, because it feels like it's happening again. And we're going to start with free agency. It seems like nobody has signed a free agent in weeks. We talked about that. The Chiefs are no exception, but we should start with, before we kind of talk about the holes that the Chiefs still have to fill and what they might do there. They did bring in a couple of new players that we kind of wanted to get your feedback on. The big news on the offensive side of the ball, obviously, was the signing of former Jags right tackle Jawan Taylor. And then shortly after that, the somewhat surprising news, I think surprising to me at least, that the Chiefs are going to flip him over to the left side. So your thoughts on that move, obviously coming on the first day of free agency, and then the announcement that he's going to play left tackle for the Chiefs instead of right tackle.
Yeah. I think looking at his body of work and what he was able to do, with the Jaguars, the type of player he is, his athleticism, whatnot, I'm not surprised to see the Chiefs, come in and say, hey, I think we can flip this guy and, have him play on the left side. It's not as easy as it sounds. So, I have a little hesitancy there. Sure. But I think that they paid him as such, like that. That's like he got paid like he was a left tackle. Now, if they draft someone who can play left tackle, are they going to perchance keep Jawan at right tackle? I think having that flexibility is something that they wanted. And I think that, you listen to Jawan's introductory press conference, and he kind of alluded to, hey, I will play where I'm needed, if that's left side, if that's the right side. He didn't kind of say, he didn't pull the Orlando Brown.
Yeah, I was going to say, not
tackle.
in Orlando. Right.
So I think that's a good thing. I think that, if you do draft a guy, and even if you draft a guy that maybe is you take an Alabama's Tyler Steen, a guy who played left tackle at Alabama, but is maybe better suited for the right side or even guard. But if you draft one of those guys who has some experience there, you can kind of maybe, play around with things in camp. And, Andy Reid's always been about, hey, we're going to roll the best 5 guys out there. So I fully expect them to do a little bit of experimentation and try to find that right combo. I think the key right now is just like specifically that position. Like they're not done. They're going to bring in more competition. I've heard from people in the know that Lucas Nyang is someone that they're really high on the right side.
Interesting.
And I know that Chiefs fans are kind of down on him, but like he's not the same player that he was when he entered the league, right? Like this is a guy who was a little overweight. He was coming off a hip injury out of TCU, dropped to the third round, probably would have gone higher if he wasn't injured. And you know, then he had the COVID opt out. Then, you know, his first year playing, he had the knee injury. And then this past year, he was kind of working back from that, but he's a lot slimmer now than he initially was. Like his kick slide is always not going to be the prettiest. I think it was Kyle Long. He said on Twitter, he said that he's, you know, he's not a Mona Lisa or something like that, you know,
hey, but, not every one of Mozart's paintings was a masterpiece. So that's
okay. Right. Something like that. But you know, I think that he's going to be in the mix. Like they're going to give him a chance, being that he's a former third round draft pick, being that, you know, they liked him coming out. They like his talent. They like what he's been about when he's been with the team, when he's been in Kansas City. So I think that, you know, best case scenario, like Jawan Taylor's your left tackle and Lucas Nyang's your right tackle. You draft a rookie who can be a swing. Like that would be, in my eyes, best case scenario. And you feel, you know, good about your room. But we'll see. We'll see what transpires. You know, we got the draft coming up, and that's you know, that can change a lot of things.
We'll talk about the draft, Charles. But I like that observation that you made, though, too, because you're right. It's a good point that it's not like, I mean, they said, you know, it wasn't necessarily coming from the team. Like, he's our left tackle of the future. He's locked in at left tackle. He's going to play left tackle all 4 years. It was kind of like James Palmer and, you know, Ian Rappaport saying like, oh, we're hearing, you know, he's going to be the left tackle. But then, you know, you get to the press conference and Jawan is not coming in saying I'm a left tackle. He's coming in saying I'm going to play wherever they want me to play, which I do think is telling. On the defensive side, obviously the big addition was Charles Omenihu. And, he's a guy that I don't know that he was necessarily on my radar, but a guy that, you know, as soon as he was signed, I said, yes, this makes sense. This is a player that I like. Curious to get your thoughts on him.
Yeah, he was one of the top guys on my radar, only because he's someone they've had like a ton of interest in. And I think he said this in his introductory press conference too. He was like, you know, he went on like a top 30 visit with the team. He had a formal interview at the combine. Like he felt like the Chiefs were going to draft him in 2019, and they didn't. But, you know, he ends up with what? Houston Texans. Houston Texans trade him to the 49ers, but guess who was involved in those trade talks before he gets traded to the 49ers? You guessed it, the Kansas City Chiefs. So, like, this is a guy that they've been interested in, and he's coming off of one of his best seasons. You know, really productive inside-outside pass rusher. I think, you know, having that versatility and that flexibility to play edge and to kick inside on those pass rushing downs, like Steve Spagnuolo loves that. You know, he's always had that kind of that versatile group. And I think that, you know, is he going to be, you know, he said a couple things, you know, in his intro presser that indicated that maybe, you know, he's ready for full-time starting type of role. I don't think that really any of the edge rushers in Kansas City are quote unquote considered like starters. Yeah. Like this last year, they really like they were very strong with their rotation. So I think, you know, you get maybe another guy in there and you have a pretty good like 3-man, 4-man edge rotation in, you know, Karlaftis, Dana, Omenihu, and whoever they get somebody in the draft.
Frank back maybe.
You could potentially bring Frank back. I just don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think that'll be an option, but it's going to be whether or not the Chiefs can find some common ground with Chris Jones on a deal and get him extended, free up some cap space. I think that after the draft, I think right now they're really kind of shoehorned in and focused on the draft. I don't think there's a lot of free agents out there that they're really interested in right now that are like high priced guys that like, hey, we need to get this done before the draft. I think if you're talking like an Odell, like he's not going to want to come to sign with a team, and go to OTAs or anything like that. Like, he's going to probably sign before training camp. Frank Clark's probably going to sign before training camp, but Jerick McKinnon's probably going to sign
old
before.
Guys.
Right. Some of these older veterans, these guys who are, just a little bit later in their career and don't necessarily need that wear and tear and to be there for those types of things. So, if they get something done with Chris Jones, maybe they can, go after that, or, someone gets released, D-Hop or whatever, something. If something happens, that could be a possibility, a Frank Clark or adding another edge rusher. But yeah, I liked the Omenihu signing. I think he'll be a really good addition to that room. And he's certainly going to help, bring back some of the pressures that the team lost in free agency so far.
Yeah. So you mentioned both, Odell and Hopkins. Obviously, I feel like the average Chiefs fan right now is looking at the wide receiver room, and every other position group and everything else is fine. But the wide receivers are something that, Juju's gone, McColl's gone. Really, it's MVS and the Ross twins and Justin and John Ross, and really there's not a lot in there. So
Kadarius,
of course, Kadarius Toney, yes, but I mean he's also kind of this enigma of like, he plays 5 snaps and he's the most impactful player in the Super Bowl. Like how, what do you have with him? What don't you have? But the wide receiver room certainly looks like a room right now that could use the most infusion of talent. And I'm of the opinion that a free agent wide receiver would bring a lot of juice just back to the offseason for the Chiefs. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the answer to all the problems, but like, I think that it's really interesting to me that they didn't get a deal done or they didn't bring in somebody by now in the offseason. Do you feel like this is all kind of going according to plan, or did maybe some numbers not make sense the way that Brett wanted them to, as far as bringing guys in? Like, what's your feeling on how the free agent process with the wide receiver room went for the Chiefs?
I think the whole receivers were blowing up Patrick Mahomes' phone thing was load, but
yes.
And but no, I think the plan was to bring back Juju, and I think that once they realized that wasn't going to happen, the market and getting guys in, it kind of dried up pretty quick. There weren't guys that, and look, it wasn't a good free agent class of receivers.
No, not at all.
One of the worst I can remember, really.
Right. And, I think that Veach learned something about Patrick Mahomes and about the wide receiver situation last year. And it's not to say he doesn't want to improve it or find like a number one wide receiver. But like, you don't need to have that. Like, if you can go get like 2 guys, find a guy in the draft, find a veteran free agent, or someone gets cut loose, or, have someone who is on your roster already step up, who can catch, 30, 40 passes for 600, 800 yards. You don't need 1,000 yards. You don't need, a surefire number one receiver. You need a platoon because look, like guys are going to get hurt throughout the course of the year. You're going to need guys to step up at that position. And it's not going to be, it wasn't the same guy every week, for Kansas City throughout the season.
Far from
it's not
other
than
Kelsey. Right. And Kelsey also kind of profiles you've got a number one target. It might not be a number one wide receiver, but it's not like Patrick's going out there and has a bunch of jabronis he's throwing to. Like, he's still got Travis.
No one still, how many seasons has he been playing now? No one knows how to defend him still. They'll say they're going to do everything they can to take him away, but it just doesn't work. And Kelsey's just shown no signs of slowing down, right? Like,
he's speeding up. Like, I feel like last year he was still, as productive as ever. Quick temperature check. Yeah, exactly. Quick temperature check on Sky Moore. How are you feeling about his, future with the team and all that stuff?
I think that fans need to cut him a little bit of slack. They look at like his first year and then they're like, oh man, most players, at least, in their first year did this or did that. I think it was just, kind of a matter of time. I think he was kind of body blocked a little bit by like Juju. We saw kind of his big games come when Juju was hurt. Or when he wasn't as effective. I mean, I think some of the tape that he put out there tells you all you need to know about what he can be in the NFL. And look, like, it's not like he's sitting back like, I won a Super Bowl my rookie year. I'm just going to like do nothing this offseason or whatever. He's out there with Pat right now at the throwing session. Like, he's working, he's putting in the work. So he knows the opportunity he has ahead of him and that, he can potentially be that guy who comes in to, replace some of that production lost with Juju. And I think, that's kind of a little bit of what he's going to do. He's going to, kind of do some of that dirty work on the inside and outside and catch some of those tough passes across the middle of the field. And I think he can do well with it because of his route running, his ability to get open in those tight spaces. So I'm excited to see what he can do in his second year. I think he's gonna be much more productive than he was as a rookie. Let's just say that.
So Charles, let's talk about rookies. Let's turn to the draft. And I know you have been grinding for months now to prepare. You've been doing great work over at ChiefsWire and at KCSN, which again, we encourage everybody to go and check out if you've not already done so. But let's talk about the draft because the Chiefs are picking last in the first round, which is always a great place to be. And it's not pick 32. Thank you to the Dolphins for forfeiting that pick. So last pick of the first round, but it's 31. We get a pick early. It's in Kansas City. Brett Veach took his first round pick in whatever it was, 3 years last year, and he made 2 picks. Chiefs are hosting the draft. I guess the first question is two-parter here. Do you see the Chiefs holding on to this pick? And actually, let me qualify that. I'm going to say, do you see the Chiefs picking in the first round? Because technically trading up would not be holding on to the pick, but we know Brett Veach likes to go get guys. Do you see the Chiefs staying in the first round with this pick? And what position do you think they are most likely to kind of attack?
Right. So here's the thing. I just finished a NFL Wire Network mock draft where these are fun. And I give so much credit to our leadership at the Wire Network at USA Today for putting these things together because it's so hard to coordinate when you have 32 different people, trying to like get these things done. And it literally took us like two and a half days to complete.
Oh man, that's incredible.
And this is just a 2-round mock draft. I'll be so like it was a long process, but the thing about trading up that I have learned doing this is our third. Yeah, this is the 3.0 of our Wire Network mock draft, our first with 2 rounds. But you got to find a partner who wants to trade with you and who wants to, specifically take those picks off your hands, be it stuff, later in the draft, stuff from 2024, whatever, and you got to be able to negotiate that and figure that out and whatnot. And, I talked to a couple different people to try and trade up to get a receiver.
Teams?
What teams did I talk to? Let me pull up the document and I can tell you. give me like half a second.
Yeah, of course.
We're doing this live.
Well, it's just always so interesting how those conversations go. And, they're sitting there and they've got plans for their team and they're thinking, I've got 17. I'm looking at this 3 players. And then in comes the Chiefs going, hey, the rich guys want your 17th pick. It's like, no, get out of here. Like,
it's also different when you're doing it with other people who know those teams, right? Like,
exactly.
Obviously when you're looking at a computer generated mock draft, those are great and they're all well and good and they're fun. But like, the computers don't know what those teams really need.
Nor do they care.
It's just an algorithm. And, I think fans or analysts, whatever you want to call them, fanalists, professionals who cover the team, like, one thing that we know about NFL teams is that they overvalue their own picks. And like a computer won't do that, but a human will, right? Like, okay, you want to come up to 17 so you can take Jackson Smith and Jigba, whatever, like, all right, you're going to have to play ball with me,
Right.
So yeah, really curious to see who you talked to and what they were looking for.
So I started thinking about making a trade at 14 when Zay Flowers came off the board.
Okay.
All right. Jackson Smith, he was already gone. He was gone.
Where did he go?
12 to the Green Bay Packers. He was
12.
Gone.
Yeah, he's going to be a really good
As soon as they get rid of Aaron Rodgers, they go and trade.
They get a first round
wide receiver in the first round. Sure. That makes sense.
I was talking with the Texans. They were at, I think, where were they at? They traded down with the Packers, and they were at number 15.
Okay.
But the Texans ended up trading number 15 to someone else. They traded it to the Bucks. And they got numbers, I want to say 19 and what is it? 82.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, I don't think the Commanders are going to take a receiver. And I'm targeting Quentin Johnston. Like I'm thinking like QJ is my guy. Like I'm thinking, let's go get him.
Yeah.
They brought him in for a top 30 visit. They clearly got some interest there. He's a talented player. A lot of people think he's the top receiver in the draft. I'm like, let's go get this guy. Mm-hmm. So I start talking to people. I talked to the Commanders. They were like, nah. Talked to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had someone who they had their eyes on. Mm-hmm. Talked to the Detroit Lions. Got close. Did not get the deal done. Next thing I know, number 19, Minnesota Vikings. They trade up, I believe, with Tampa Bay via Houston.
19, which is what you said, Houston.
Right,
Yep.
Yeah. So and they go get Quentin Johnston. So
they don't even need a wide receiver. What are they doing?
They have the best one in the game.
Come on.
They wanted to pair him. And look,
did they want to trade Justin Jefferson to us because they don't want to pay him?
No, they wanted to pair someone. And look, I mean, you pair Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, and that's
a good stitch.
Running back they got, Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
With Quentin Johnston, if
now all you need is a better quarterback,
right? And I'm saying if you can't get it done with that quarterback, then then if you're the Vikings. So. Then I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, can I maybe move up to get Jordan Addison? And I couldn't. And then I'm like, oh, can I get Nolan Smith? And you know what?
Yeah.
At that point, I'm getting tired. I'm like, I've talked to a lot of people, right? I've talked to a couple of teams now, and I'm like, I don't think that like this trade up is going to happen. And I got to a point where I'm just like, I'm going to wait it out. And, this question that I asked people on Twitter today actually kind of stemmed from this mock draft. And I kind of posed this idea, like, is the tight end number 1 or safety number 1 in the draft, like, is that someone a better player, a better prospect, a better option for Kansas City than having to pick like the 6th offensive tackle off the board, or like wide receiver number 5, or defensive tackle number 4 or 3, or, edge 7, whatever I was at, I personally found myself thinking like, hey, I think I should probably take the best possible prospect who's probably going to be the tight end number 1. Like if I'm dead set on adding to the offense in round 1, like I think that's probably got to be your best option.
Sure.
whether you have Travis Kelce or not. But look, I mean, the Chiefs, we're talking about a team that runs the second most 12 personnel in the NFL, most 13 personnel. They're the only damn team who's ever considered putting 14. 4 tight ends on the field at once, right? T-Rex. So I'm thinking, hey, let's go get tight end number 1 in that type of situation. But look, it's there's so many different things and ways this draft can play out, right? Like, in this specific case, I don't think people are talking about Hendon Hooker going in the first round now.
Right. I saw that.
Right.
Creeping up
so
into the first.
If you get 5 quarterbacks going in the first round, that's a big deal. If you start to, get some of these other positions, if you get like a center, like a Joe Tippmann, or some of these edge rushers getting pushed up, some more of these tight ends, some of these guys, if they get pushed up into the first round, that's good for Kansas City, because it's going to push down some of this talent that, they're really looking to grab. And, it's just going to be, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to have it in Kansas City, and to see what Brett Veach does. I mean, I think, a lot of people with this specific scenario I was in, they're like, hey, trade back. And I'm like, I couldn't find anyone who wanted to trade up.
Sure.
Either, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't find anybody who wanted to trade with you at all, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah. You went with DeJuan Jones, Ohio State tackle?
No, I ended up going with,
I'm reading your
spoiler alert here. I ended up going with Dalton Kincaid, Utah tight end.
Now,
my number 1 ranked tight end.
Okay, so the wires got you going with DeJuan Jones, Siaka Ika, and Marvin Mims.
That's not this is an unreleased mock draft that I'm telling you guys about.
I didn't know we were on the bleeding edge.
You're getting the insider deets. You won't get to see it in full until Monday. But
you pamper us. We appreciate it. Well, that's really interesting.
I like the idea of getting TE1, not only because Andy's a guy that certainly could find a way to maximize the talents of somebody like a Dalton Kincaid. There's obviously so many freakish tight ends in this class. I mean, this is one of the best, deepest tight end classes we've seen in quite a long time, I would say. Right. I mean, not only because of the implications of what he could do with a guy like that this year, but eventually Travis Kelce, he will slow down. And obviously the Chiefs have been reducing his snaps every year anyway. I mean, they've been selective about his usage. They're starting to scale him back. I don't hate that at all, but it is interesting. Obviously, you kind of mentioned your thought process was, I'm going to trade up, and if I'm trading up, I'm looking for a wide receiver or an edge rusher. Do you get the sense that is where the team is focused as well, or do you think they have other positions in mind with potentially that 31st pick, or even going up into, the early 20s, late teens?
Yeah. I think the edge rusher is so deep this year. Like, there's probably a couple of guys that they like that they would be okay with waiting and seeing, how far is this going to fall? Because there are other guys that they can get who are going to be comparable. Like I said in that tweet, I mean, we were, I think 8 edge rushers went in the first round, 7, 8, something like that.
Crazy.
Like a lot of these guys went in the first round, and there were still guys, further on that, that people ended up grabbing. And I think you can afford to wait there. However, if there's a guy that you really like, if Nolan Smith is your guy, I mean, they sent our defensive line coach to the Georgia Pro Day, had him running the drills. He was working with Nolan Smith. They had a formal with him. That type of thing, seeing that happen, makes me think hey, this is a guy they probably like quite a bit. For trading up for a wide receiver, I think you do it if the guy that you like drops a little bit into range, striking distance, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's also a bit of a limit there, right? I don't think that you're only going to trade up for the right guy. Like if there's someone that Brett Veach falls in love with and has his heart set on, gotta trade up to get him.
And he will, because we know Brett Veach is he's not afraid to go up and get a guy. Obviously, they just did it last year with McDuffie. But I wanted to ask you, Charles, you've mentioned a couple of times, and this is one of the things that I think ChiefsWire does better than anybody. You've got a great top 30 tracker going on right now, and I know that takes a lot of effort to keep updated. I'm always really curious about this. We had a running joke on this podcast. I called him
30 for 30.
30 for 30 visits because I don't understand either why they're called top 30 visits or why it was called 30 for 30. We've gone over this on the podcast before. I've already forgotten. Every year in the draft, we go through this. But how much do these visits matter? And, you mentioned how secretive the Chiefs have kind of become about their local pro days, but I'm always curious when, this is public information. They're going out and talking to these guys and bringing these guys in. How much of that is, I mean, this is a guy that we would definitely take. I mean, you're giving information away to other teams when you bring these guys in too, right? So I'm always interested in kind of what that balance is. Like, how do they show interest in that player? And, obviously they're bringing these guys in for a reason with the visits versus, kind of tipping your hand a little bit. Because I think one of the things that the Chiefs have been really good about under Brett Veach's tenure is playing their cards really very close to their chest.
Nobody knows what they're up to.
Right. I do think they matter quite a bit. And it's not just about the top prospects, right? They bring guys in who are priority free agent likelies or like day 3 picks. Like they're trying to bring in some of these later round guys to sell them. Like it's not just about like learning more about these guys. It's also about selling some of these guys on the team. Which would seem like it's not like super hard to do, but when you get into like, contracts, guys offering guaranteed money and whatnot, like some of these things will matter a little bit more, in the long run. And so, with the top guys, I think it's interesting because if you look back at some of these top 30 visits over the years, I mean, we can look back to, last year, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams, 2 guys that we confirmed to take top 30 visits with the team. And they're drafted by the team. So, and you can go back each and every year. Nick Bolton, top 30 visit, drafted by the team. I think that year it was virtual visits, though, technically, because of the COVID year. But what have you. Go back to 2019. You got, Juan Thornhill. He was in for a visit. Trying to think who else. I believe that Mecole Hardman confirmed that he had come in for a visit, but we never reported on that one. I don't think anyone had that one there. But I mean, look, like there are guys every year who come in to visit the team who end up drafted by the team. So I think that'll continue to stand true. And how important are they in the long run? We might never know. They're just another part of the process, a fun part of the process, though. I always enjoy reporting on them kind of ahead of the draft and, seeing the different guys come in and, having an opportunity to know that they were in there. And, after the draft, they get drafted by the team. You can kind of talk to them about that, find out what that was like for them. But yeah, top 30 visit also is a little bit of a misnomer, right? It's, there are only 30 visits. That's why they're called top 30 visits.
That's what I'm saying. This is the whole top 30, 30 for 30.
There are only 30 visits for who?
So each team is allotted 30
gets 30
visits.
guys. So it's the team's 30 visits.
Correct.
Yeah, it's the team's top 30 visits, but they can only have 30. So it's
also the bottom 30.
It's the only 30 visits. Right. Charles, let me ask you this about the 30 for 30 visits. Obviously, you've got some guys in the tracker that we know have already visited with the Chiefs. Of those guys, are there guys that, I guess let me ask another 2-parter here. Anybody that they've brought in for a visit that you've kind of grinded the tape on and said, yes, I get it. That's a guy that I want to hear his name called on Thursday night or whatever, Friday night, Saturday. I want that guy to be on the Chiefs. Can't wait to watch that guy on Sundays. And conversely, on the flip side, have there been anybody that the Chiefs have brought in that you thought, I don't see it, and I'm hoping Brett is bringing this guy in to cross him off the list? Because that's, they brought in George Pickens for a top 30 visit last year, right? And they had the opportunity multiple times to take Pickens, and they did not take him. And I don't know if you have any inside information on this, but I assume that there was something, as part of that pre-draft process that made them think this is not a guy that we're incredibly interested in. So on either side here, are there guys that you would like to see the team draft and guys that you hope that they don't draft?
Right. So I think like the only really like character concern guy that I know of was the Tennessee linebacker Jeremy Banks. They brought him in, and I mean, like super talented athlete. Like the way I see it with some of these guys, like it's important. It's smart to do your homework. Like if this guy, had the testing numbers that he had and didn't have the off-field issues that popped up when he was at Tennessee, he got kicked off the team and eventually reinstated. I'm trying to remember the details. It was something that had to do with a comment made about police, or I don't know, something. It was something very,
sure.
And anyhow, so he has the off-field issues. You bring the guy in, you try to get to know him better, to understand, what happened in those situations, to understand if this guy has grown throughout his career. Because we all know Andy Reid is very big on, growth and helping these players not just develop as players, but develop as people, and guys who can contribute and be good members of society, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think that's an important part of this for him. So bringing in a guy like that to kind of find out and figure out the backstory, like that's important. But then you've got other like top 30 visits that are, related to, player health, right? Like,
want their doctors to look at him and stuff. I mean,
yeah.
Did Trey Smith ever get a top 30? He didn't, did he?
I think he might have actually. Okay. I know that,
because that would have been a good health
one. Right. And I think that like that's a good example of like the type of guy that you want to bring in for a top 30 visit to find out like, hey, is he good? I think Rashee Rice had like a toe injury, and I think he had some off-field stuff too, if I'm not mistaken.
They've all got off-field stuff if you dig hard enough,
right? Right. I mean,
social media. How can they avoid it?
I certainly think it's possible, but look, there's some other guys. I think that had some injury stuff going on that they brought in. Mm-hmm. And it's an important piece of the puzzle, piece of the equation, something that you got to find out and kind of go through and see that they're okay, because you don't want to draft a player who's not going to be available for whatever reason, right?
Best ability is availability. Absolutely.
Right.
So we'll get you out of here with kind of a discussion on sleepers, more or less. So like draft guys that if you're looking through the tape, you're trying to, be familiar with as many guys as you can. Maybe is there anyone that jumps out to you that you looked at that doesn't quite profile, like doesn't have maybe the hype amongst the draft community that you think they should, or someone that you were like, oh, like this guy would actually, I'm surprised that he's fallen as low on these mocks or anything, just someone that you were positively impressed by?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of depth in this class. I mean, one of the guys that recently took a visit with the team, the defensive lineman out of Toledo, Dawan Johnson, I think his name is. Like he was a menace at the East-West Shrine Bowl. Like,
nice.
Guys couldn't block him. Like he was just always
That's
getting
a good
free.
time to be a menace. Yeah.
Right. And he's someone that I believe they met with him at the East-West Bowl, and then brought him in for a top 30 visit. But that's a guy who's probably like talking day 3 pick or undrafted free agent.
Okay.
But I mean, there's I could go on. There's so many great, just talented players. I'm trying to think of some good ones.
And the Chiefs have a surplus of late round picks, and they,
right.
like you look at the total number of picks and you think like, okay, well, a lot of these are, 7th rounders or whatever they are. But I mean, last year they hit on Isaiah Pacheco, right, in a big way. And even, Najee Johnson played some snaps, he contributed on special teams. I mean, like, those are home runs in the 7th round. I mean, especially Pacheco. But I mean, the Chiefs have really, it seems like, done an unbelievable job. I mean, even Brett Veach getting off to kind of a slow start, maybe as a drafter. I mean, he's always been absolute money with late round picks and priority free agents. It feels like that's something that the Chiefs do better than like any team in the NFL.
Yeah, and they spend like a lot of time and, invest a lot of resources in these guys. Like, you'll see a lot of teams around the league right now that are bringing in really like purely first round draft picks on these top 30 visits.
Yeah.
Right.
So do you know if Jalen Watson got a visit last year? 7th round home run.
He did. So
sure.
They invest a lot of time. And, one thing that Brett Veach does, because he's been there before, right? Like, this is a guy who kind of grinded up from the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
Like he started off as like an assistant to like the coach. Like, he was getting guys coffee. Like, that was his job. Right.
Yeah.
And so he trusts his guys. Like, he trusts the guys who are out there on the road. He knows what it's like to be a scout, to go out there. Like, he puts a lot of trust in his guys to tell him like, hey, this guy can be a difference maker. And I mean, it paid off last year. So I think that, and like, these are the scouts who are on the road, who are talking to, these guys, learning their stories, learning about who they are as a person and a player. Like, they're the guys who are going to inform Veach. Like, he has a lot on his plate, a lot to process. And these guys are, it's kind of like a hydra, each one of these guys is a tentacle, so it's a fun process. I think there's going to be some gems that they can unearth this year. And, we're still seeing kind of the results of, of the COVID year and guys like who are getting that extra eligibility and now they're clearing for the draft and coming out. Right. So I think there's greater depth of talent throughout the draft. And, Brett Veach, he always talks about identifying the different pockets and, finding when players are going to start to go and when you can kind of grab and navigate through all that to find the guy that you want to get. And I think there are going to be some interesting pockets that he can kind of move around and navigate in this draft.
Well, I certainly know that after the last 2 drafts, whatever it is that Brett Veach wants to get up to on draft day, I am all for. I think he's got it all figured out. Speaking of got it all figured out, Charles, we super appreciate your time. Great catching up with you. For anyone that was listening, Charles does great work with the ChiefsWire and the editorial director at KC Sports Network, does their newsletters, all kinds of fun stuff there. Can't wait to talk to you next time. Hopefully catch up with you. If not at the draft, then here sometime coming up soon down the road.
Sounds great.